Across the centuries, people always gather where beverages are available. Even today, we sometimes call a restaurant or lounge our favourite watering hole, because it's the place we go after work to unwind with our friends over a glass of wine or something. It was probably not a lot different at Village Wells back in Jesus' time. It was the town watering hole, where everyone gathered 2 times a day, and somewhere people lingered a bit to tell some tales, catch up on some news, and also stay current on all the juiciest town gossip. This Samaritan woman had no doubt long been a favourite subject of such gossip. Needless to say, when she used to show up at the well in person, a lot of conversation ceased. Eyes were averted. Maybe even a few dirty looks were directed her way. So eventually she'd given up. She stayed home when everyone else was out, and she went out only when everyone else was at home. In the past, we may have assumed that she got what she deserved. We've chalked her up as a sleazy, sinful woman. But she may have been a victim too. Don't forget that in Jesus' day, women had almost zero social standing. They certainly could not be the initiators of divorce. They had very little choice or control over their own lives. And if she is divorced, it's because the men divorced her. She had no rights. All a man had to do was haul his wife out into the street and then say to her 3 times, "I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you." And that was that. Don't get any ideas. Maybe it was just divorce, but often it was not. If she's not divorced, then she has suffered the death of 5 husbands, 5 times left alone, 5 times nameless, faceless, and of no value, 5 times starting over. Maybe some divorced her, maybe some died, we don't know. Either one, divorce or death, is a tragedy for her life. And so perhaps this woman was the kind of person who, desperate for some attention and affection, hooked up with the wrong men, who in turn used her and discarded her. I don't know that this was so, but one thing becomes clear in the course of her conversation with Jesus. She's not a religious ignoramus. This woman knows some theology. This woman has thought about spiritual matters. She's aware of the promised Messiah, knows something of the controversy between Jews and the Samaritans about where God may, or may not, be appropriately worshipped. The town long since wrote her off as a bad sort of person, but inside her skin beat the heart of someone thirsty for God. But long before any of that became evident, she first had to overcome her shock at having Jesus talk to her at all. As just noted, her heart no doubt sank when she saw that on that particular day, her plan to avoid all contact was failing. Someone was there. Worse, it was a man. Doubly worse, it looked like a Jewish man. We didn't see too many Jews in Samaria most days. Jews rather avoided that area, willingly adding a few extra days to their journey so they could take the long way around and avoid that stretch of land called Samaria. Jesus had opted against that. And so he cut straight through the heart of Samaria. So when she saw him, she perhaps averted her eyes, grit her teeth, and hoped to get through this as painlessly as possible. But then the man cleared his throat, and she no doubt thought, here it comes. But no, there's a kind note in his voice. He even asks her for some water, instead of barking out a demand to her. Probably she should have kept her mouth shut, but she's so taken back that she blurts out, "What in the world's going on here? You're a Jew. You're not supposed to talk to me, a Samaritan." And Jesus was indeed breaking with convention to engage in conversation with this woman, which is why the disciples will shortly be so scandalised to witness it. After all, consider these pieces of conventional wisdom that were current in Jesus' day. A man shall not talk with a woman in the street, not even with his own wife, on account of what others may say. He that talks much with womankind brings evil upon himself. If any man gives a woman a knowledge of God's law, it is as though he has taught her lechery. Thank goodness we've come a long way. But Jesus not only speaks with this woman, he speaks the words of life to her. He uses the well as an occasion to introduce the memorable image of living water, a new spring of water that would well and bubble up into eternity. And needless to say, this woman wants to buy stock in the company that produces this wonderful liquid. Okay, Jesus says, but let's bring your husband into the deal too. Why did Jesus say that? To shame her the way the other residents would do by mentioning this? No. To embarrass her or condemn her? No. But probably as a reminder to her that she had been trying to slake her thirst in all the wrong ways. It wasn't sex or meeting Mr. Right or finding companionship that was going to drown her thirst. And eventually she catches on to what Jesus is saying, unlike Nicodemus in the previous chapter of John's Gospel. We know how she responded. She raced back to the village and began knocking on doors whose doorsteps she had not darkened in years. Somehow she forgot that she was supposed to avoid these people. And instead, she rather quickly became part of the community again. And before the story's finished, villagers are actually speaking to her again, and speaking gratefully at that. People like her, people like us, people with a past, often live in fear of being found out. It's not just the fear that another will know the truth, the facts about us, but that they will do so without ever really seeing us and without ever really knowing us. We all thirst to be seen and to be known at a deep and intimate level. We all want to pour out our lives to someone who knows us, to let them drink from the depths of our very being. And that's exactly what Jesus is asking of this woman with a past when he says, "Give me a drink." It is the invitation to let herself be known. To be known is to be loved, and to be loved is to be known. To be found out, however, without being known, leaves us dry and desolate, leaves us to live a dehydrated life, thirsting for something more, something different, but always returning to the same old wells. It's also astonishing that this woman proclaimed the good news by claiming she'd met a man who'd told me everything I've ever done. But wasn't that past exactly what had led her to her isolation in the first place? What grace we see here, where the past that had made her so miserable now becomes the doorway through which to bring others to Jesus. It's a fine reminder that no matter who you are, Jesus is the cosmic Word made flesh, who alone can give us what we need. Academic learning and fine religious credentials no more help you get into the kingdom than a tawdry reputation can keep you out. If I were ever going to make a short movie of this incident, I know what I think my final image would want to be. It emerges from a tiny yet telling detail in verse 28, when we are told that this woman left her water jug behind. It's quite an image. And later in the verses, as the Samaritans happily urge Jesus to stay in their village for a while, I picture the whole jubilant crowd hustling Jesus and the disciples back into town. And as the noise of their laughter fades and the dust from their feet settles in the noonday sun, I'd have a camera slowly zoom in on that abandoned water jug next to Jacob's well. She had come to that well more thirsty than she knew earlier that day, and she left sensing she'd never be truly thirsty again. To encounter Jesus is to find life, a stream of living water that wells up in us now, a stream of water that will mount up over time until it finally becomes a tidal wave of cleansing that will wash over the entire world, making us and all things new. That's the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Okay. Across the centuries, people always gather where beverages are available.